Well, hello, welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us today as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. If only. How often those words of disappointment have been spoken in lament about what could have been if only. That thought applies to our first psalm for today as well. The ESV translation I'm looking at puts a statement over the psalm that says, "Oh, that my people would listen to me." Psalm begins with an invitation to Israel to join in worship at one of her festivals, to celebrate the deliverance that God had given her from Egypt and the blessings that He's bestowed on her from the Promised Land. It then goes on to remind Israel of God's admonishment to her that she not worship or call on any other gods, that His blessings would continue to flow generously for her if she would but do that. But Israel would not listen. Instead of life, she chose death. She received death. Instead of victory, she received defeat. Instead of blessing, she received curses. So the lament goes on, if only. Our second psalm for today is Psalm 88. It's a horse of quite another color, possibly the darkest of all of the psalms. For after the reference in that first verse to God who saves us, in the first verse of Psalm 88, to God who saves us, there is absolutely no hope in this psalm at all, only despair. Day and night the psalmist says, "I cry out to you." The psalmist asks God to incline his ear to him, and then goes on seemingly without end on the desperate situation that he's in. He reminds God that at least with respect to this world, one who has died can no longer praise him because he feels that God is driving him into the deep, that he's being abandoned by God to the grave. He calls to God, yet God seems to hide his face from him. The psalm never returns to hope as do virtually all the other psalms, but closes with the word darkness in the ESV translation, just as it does in the Hebrew. When we see no hope, no light, if we despair completely, this psalm tells us that we're not alone. God has placed the words of another who felt the same in his book of Revelation to us, lest we despair completely and give up. For though we may give up on God, God never gives up on us, and he will come to our aid. And indeed, our next psalm, Psalm 92, returns to praising God for the works of his hand. It's labeled a song for the Sabbath, and it recalls the greatness and majesty of our God. Those who do not know God, who do not acknowledge him, may indeed live lives of great prosperity for a while, like the lush grass of spring, but they're doomed to destruction, for their prosperity is fleeting and not eternal. But a believer is more like a long-lived tree that produces the fruit of praise to God both now and in eternity. Psalm 93 then continues the theme, acknowledging that the Lord reigns, that he's robed in majesty with strength as his belt. Though Psalm 93 is very brief, it uses repetition for emphasis. It uses the power of the sea to make its point about God's power over all of creation. The sea's power, especially in storm, humbles us to this very day, just as it did in the day of the psalmist. We're assured in this psalm that God rules over all, that he always has, and that he always will. Well, as always, I pray that these psalms are comforting to you, that they speak to your needs, to your feelings at various times. I pray that God will be with you and bless you as you continue with us in our read through, and I look forward to gathering with you then again tomorrow.